Hello, my name is Robert Burr. This video is about MolaMessenger, the project for the summer term for class CO2 6931. The project is involving Baptist healthcare system in Pensacola, Florida, and basically how MolaMessenger can help solve a process issue that Baptist healthcare has. Communication during the disaster. This is just a quote from the Health Resource Service Administration that I found, and it's pretty common sense. The quality of key decisions made during emergencies is critical, dependent on the availability of current, accessible, accurate, and relevant information. And what really that means is during disaster type situations, your key decisions during emergency have to be accurate, have to be accessible, and have to be real current and up to date, and it has to be quite quick. And that's one of the things that MolaMessenger idea came from. Baptist Healthcare does have a process in place, but there's always room for improvement. Once again, information communicated internally and to the public is a critical point that had to be addressed in any organization. Really, when an organization sends out information, a lot of the healthcare facilities kind of divide things up internally and externally. Of course, messages can actually overlap, or they can actually be in one or two categories, internal or externally. Sometimes information that you want to give to the public, to the internal, is not information you want to give out to the public. Stuff like what facilities need to be open, disaster type internal messages that really the public doesn't really need about. The scenario on the bottom of the slide is a scenario that I came up with, and it talks about a patient that has a health issue, and it talks about how quick information, up-to-date information is quite important. This patient has a health issue, and the family needs to know what healthcare facilities they need to go to. Of course, the health issue is very important time-wise, and having accurate information, having quick information, and having that accessible, whether it's a website, text, or whatever, is very important to family members, to patients who really are just really hungry for information. I mean, they're listening to radio. They're trying to get any information they can to see what's going on with the world around them, because during disasters, communication is usually cut off. How healthcare facilities communicate information with their organization and to the public was a critical point in any organization. And once again, this is just a slide to really emphasize that this is kind of what MolaMessenger was about. This is the key point. The facilities need to be communicated to the public and to an internal, or both, and they have to be quick and they have to be accurate. Now let's go with Baptist Healthcare. Baptist Healthcare in Pensacola is the client. And upon talking to marketing director Kane McGuire, she shared with me some ideas. And one of the ideas that came about was the process in place to communicate. Of course, right now we're in hurricane season, and they're thinking about their process and how they can really upgrade and improve on that. And once she kind of shared with me the process, there was always room for improvement, and some ideas did come about from that conversation. Now, the process she described basically is this. They do have a central command. It's sort of a central command. It is located at the Baptist Hospital, which is the flagship. And as you can see, central command is established once a hurricane, disaster, or whatever is actually happening. Here, the internal and external messages are created and they're approved. There's a leadership committee that goes over the messages to make sure everything is accurate. Now, once this information is approved, it is sent to the Director of Marketing, which is Candy, and she receives the approved message. Now, here is where the process kind of slips, and this is the room for improvement. The marketing director now must evaluate the message and who the recipients must be. Now, there's 4 categories here that I put. The main ones are the facilities, which could be other hospitals, which could be other clinics, which could be any other facilities that's connected to Baptist Healthcare. groups of people, which you can categorize, such as the leadership committee, such as maybe the nurses groups, such as perhaps the marketing group, the website, which is a key component of information. The website is obviously the place full of information and where you should get accurate information. Now, the website can be accessible through a regular PC or smartphone or tablet. And that's one of the key things that they really wanted to stress was, yes, disasters might not get information, but over time, the internet will be back up. And those are the key areas, the internet. And within the internet, that's where the key communication could come from. And it could also be text as well. And of course, press. We want to get that information out, especially to the press, because they have a wide range as well, including AM, of course, radio and TV. And eventually, over time, people will get those resources back. Now, once the decision on who's going to get the message, the problem now comes into the next step. And like I said, we still have the categories here: facilities, groups of people, the website, and the press. And here are some of the rooms for improvement. Let's say the message needs to go out to the website. Well, the process in place at Baptist Healthcare is that she now has to email the web developers, people in charge of that page that has the relevant information. The messages go out through the day, 24 hours. They go out all the day. And what I found out was sometimes the emails don't get there. There might be some information that gets lost in translation. The site does have a lapse of time. And like I said, the messages go any part of the day, so they could be 1 o'clock in the AM. The facility might actually be open, ready for that day, but the message is not conveyed on the website. Messages were being sent from the director's email. And this was kind of puzzling to me. The director's email, organization's email, Candy, she actually sends it from her email. So she creates the groups. In other words, you can create groups for facilities, the press, the website. You have that within her email. There's no standard email that it comes from. In other words, there's not an email that says disaster@baptisthealthcare.com. It actually comes from the director. So what I found out later was there's other users that might have information that needs to go out. Well, they don't have the groups that Candy has. So she's actually setting up her own groups. That's her own email that nobody else has access to. Then the next bullet, the messages that were sent to a specific facility should have been sent to 2 or more. Let's say she sends it out to one hospital, let's say Gulf Breeze. That message really should have been sent out to possibly Jay and Atmore. Well, she's already sent it out. She could really forward that again, but there is a chance that she may or may not remember that it was sent out. There might be some discussion. Atmore might want to send in, an email. There's a lot of chance for error that the message may not have been sent out to the correct organization. So archiving the messages in the database is a key component. So that way we can look to see where that message was sent and have that message sent to the appropriate facilities. Now, of course, the idea, I stressed some points here, and the idea did come from that process. And it was thought of a helpful solution for a Baptist healthcare issue, communicating disaster-type messages to internal and external recipients quickly and accurately. And those are the key things, quick and accurate. The MolaMessenger also solves the latency of publishing the message to the website, making the message live at an instance. That was one of the key things they really wanted to prove. They really believe in the website, the internet. Yes, some people may not have internet, but the smartphone now is readily available, and they're thinking that those devices using those cellular towers are a key part, especially when people are on the road looking for a facility that they need help in. They can look up information real quick, have a website that's obviously mobile ready, and have that message at an instant. That way they can bring in people who are in dire need of help. Now, how the MolaMessenger idea works it lets the MolaMessenger application lets the user select where the message needs to go. In other words, when the message is approved, when it's ready to go, there's going to be a contact list. And obviously this list is going to be predetermined by the organization. They're going to have their own groups, and it's going to be standardized, meaning if Candy, the marketing director, uses it versus Atmore, director versus Gulf Breeze, they're going to see the same contact list. So that solves the issue of one person using it on their organization email and creating their own groups. And the contact lists are ready to go for any user that logs on. And also, when the message is sent, it is archived in the database. So for instance, let's say an Atmore or J Hospital wants to send a message, they can look on the site to see if there's a relevant message that's already been sent. They don't have to duplicate the message. And let's say they have actually information that's outdated. They're not sending an outdated message compared to a message that's already been sent by another facility. Of course, as a message is being sent, it is archived in the database, and from there, the website can immediately display that information. Now, the logistics of how the website is being set up, that's up to the organization, but it could be an iframe, it could be an API, however it works. The message is readily available, and of course the message will have categories. For instance, the message will be sent to, let's say, Baptist Hospital. Well, that'll be tagged with Baptist Hospital. If it's sent to J Hospital, it'll have the category J Hospital, and it'll also have the designation, meaning if it's meant for groups of people, for instance, nurses, technicians, marketing. If it's sent to the press, it'll have that designation too. This message not only will have the content, it'll also have tags or categories giving where it needs to go and what is it about. So what does it really solve? What does it solve? MolaMessenger idea. Well, as I said before, email groups are available to all message publishers. That's a key component. So every user of this application will have the same email groups. You have that one stop for maintaining that contact groups or list. So once you update a contact list, let's say you have people coming in and out, there's a turnover in nurses, and you have that nursing group, it's outdated, or let's say somebody had just been hired. You have a one-stop location to update that contact list versus updating numerous users' contact lists, meaning the marketing director's email group's contact list will have to be updated. The director and Gulf Breeze will have to be updated. You have a big chance of error when that happens. Messages are stored in a database. That way you know when the message was sent, what it's about, what's updated, time, date. Message history is important. You can kind of see how things are. Also, it's a good way of seeing maybe ways to improve communication for the next disaster. The website can be updated by pulling in message information from the database, thus reducing time for live publishing. That's a key thing that they really stress. They wanted information out on the internet as quick as possible, as accurate as possible. As quick as possible is a major thing to them. So the website can pull or display the messages once that message is sent. Message history is created, like I said before. History of messages could be a way to improve your process for later scenarios. The internal staff gets standard messages at once. Everybody has a smartphone now. You can get the information. You don't have to be behind a nurse's station to get the latest. You can actually get your information quickly through any mobile type devices. And of course, external stakeholders get prompt, accurate messages. And what I mean by external stakeholders to them is really the patients, the family, the people who want to use these facilities. They are involved. They have a piece of this organization. They make this organization. So they get prompt, accurate messages. Facilities that are open, facilities that might be closed due to disaster type situations, including power outages, any of that stuff. But as you can see on this diagram, the command center group sends it to the MolaMessenger application. From there, the director, user, whoever, will get that message, send it on its way. There's three groups. Initially, there could be more later, but the three components were facilities, groups of people, press, and the website. There, the database is recording the message, and that's one of the key components of this application. It's storing this message ready for the message to be displayed looked at again, and archived for future use. Now, what makes up the MolaMessenger application? This is basically the technical requirements for this application. What I've chosen is the database Microsoft SQL Server 2012. It's the latest version. The server will be on Microsoft Server 2012, and it's the standard. The architecture pattern is the model view controller, and what that is separation of code, meaning instead of all the code, all the HTML, all the decision making within one page, one location, you're actually separating it. It's a good way of separation of code is a good way of troubleshooting, debugging. Having separation of code is a way also for readability. The software language chosen, of course, is HTML, JavaScript, C#, which is the server code, Razor, which is server code within the HTML, and the SQL, which is structured query language, the connection to the database. For interface use, for it to look decent, the user wants a good experience. The web application framework that I've chosen is called Zurb Foundation, and what that is the Zurb Foundation is a framework for a visually appealing website. It helps out with the CSS, with the look. There are panels, there's interactivity that's already built in, so the application has somewhat of a head start when building. The IDE to create the software for this application is going to be Visual Studio 2012. It's by Microsoft. The database development environment is SQL Server Management Studio, and that basically is the software that can see the database, can edit the database, can query the database, debug the database, and so forth. Now, I want to look at the process of MolaMessenger. This is the architectural flow of MolaMessenger. The user, in order to get in MolaMessenger, will have to go through a login. You don't want everybody going in there and messing around, changing user account settings and so forth. And what the director of marketing mentioned to me, there's going to be a select few who are going to be responsible, and that makes sense. There's standards within there. And as you see on the application flowchart, you log in the application. If the login was successful, you actually check your credentials with the MS SQL database, and if it's successful, you move on. If not, then you're going to get a retry. From there, if you're successful, you're going to reach what I call the dashboard web page. The dashboard web page is a, well, in a sense, a page that displays an overview of the campaigns, messages sent, kind of gives you a good overview of the latest activities within the application. It also displays the menu at the top, so you can kind of navigate through the application. And also, it's a good way of really kind of get a quick overview. You just need to get information really fast. Now, I mentioned navigation. The MolaMessenger application navigation will appear once you log in. And the options of navigation are you'll be able to either go in account settings, the message entry interface, that's where you're going to create the message, and where to send it, and really send off the message. And there's going to be a help section. Every application needs somewhat of a help section. People who may just need a little help on finding what this means, what the button means, how to do something, the help section will be the available area to get that help. Now, the account settings is basically the settings of the application. So as you know from the dashboard, if you select account settings in navigation, it gives the user the ability to change the password, edit contact list, just change the MolaMessenger inner workings, create contact list, edit contact list, maybe edit your name, delete a user, create an email group. That's where account settings, this is where it takes place. Now from there, if that's the only thing you need to do, you can just end the MolaMessenger program right there just by logging off. But there's another route, and this is the largest route. and that's the message entry interface. The message interface is really the purpose of MolaMessenger. This is where the user creates the message, chooses the recipients, archives the message, and actually sends the message. You can see the flow chart. There are a few decisions to be made. Once you pass the login, you go in the message entry. If you send the message, you either send it or you cancel it. If you cancel it, you end that process. You can log off after that. If you send it, what's going to happen is you're going to choose message entities. And what that is you're going to choose the email groups it needs to go to. Either facilities, the email contact groups, externally versus internally. You choose the designation of that MolaMessenger. As this happens, as it's being sent, it's also being sent to the database. This is where it's archived. All the information about that messenger, time, date, where it's being sent, the categories, the tags, are all being stored in the database while this message is being sent. Of course, while it's being archived in the database, the website can gather or gets pinged to let them know that the database has a new entry and it can be displayed automatically on the website. Once the message is sent, you can end the application, and that'll be the end of it. Or you can go ahead and select a new message if one is approved, ready to go for the next time. Now for the help section, once again, login has to be successful, and within the dashboard web page, the navigation will have a help section. And like I mentioned before, the help section is if the user has a problem or just needs to know how to do a simple task. He just really wants to do a quick find on it instead of just really searching and trying out things. This help section outlines help subjects, most frequently asked questions, and really grows from there, because the help section really, you want to get your major parts down, but you also want to get user feedbacks. Maybe you get a common question from users that say, you know what, I didn't see this in the help section. Those are the things you want to add to the help section, those common FAQ questions. Okay, the budget. Going through the communication budget, MolaMessenger was actually in 3 phases during the summer term. You had the communication phase, the planning phase, and the modeling phase. There's other phases on the second term, construction and deployment. But as of now, we're going to concentrate on the communication, planning, and the modeling. The communication phase is where you set your time schedule, set your milestones, create your description of the project, develop the budget, where you look at risk management. This is where the information gathering. It's really key to communicate as much as you can to the client. And you can see the percentages within the communication phases. Now the communication phases is detailed or is itemized by tasks. And what I've done is given an estimation per task within the communication phase. There's also a cost relevant to the percentage. And as you see, the communication phase actually takes 39% of the project, which is a hefty part, because that's really the key. If you don't put enough effort in communication and you really go in straight to modeling and so forth, you've probably missed quite a bit of important key components of that application that you have to revisit. And you're talking about a major revisit with the client. So communication actually took quite a bit of chunk of the percentage of the project so far. It's 39%, and it's at $11,700. The planning budget. The planning budget, of course, stems from the communication. You refine your documents, you refine your communication, you start putting things down on paper. One of the key things is drafting a Gantt chart with the proposed phases. You create a project definition document, possibly some mock-ups, web application. You can do it in this phase if you wanted to. And you start working on your risk. You get a lot of information from your communication. Now you start putting things on paper. You start planning your blueprint. And that's really what the planning phase is. As you can see, the planning phase took 22%. Not as much as communication, but by then you should have all your key important ideas down. And that's really what planning is. You're putting things down. And you really want to revisit the client and make sure that you guys are in sync. The client probably knows exactly what he or she wants. The key part of the communication is translating those ideas onto paper. Modeling. The modeling phase is another refinement. Another refinement in each phase. Modeling phase takes from communication and planning, and it has clear answers from both communication and the planning phases that maybe we didn't see during those phases. You start looking at flow diagrams, you start looking at documentation, you start looking at software design, you start looking at prototypes if applicable. Here's where you might find some things that you didn't think about at the beginning. So you might have to revisit. There's always maybe a possible revisit to the client. You always want to do that before the construction phase. But modeling is here's where you actually kind of create a model. It's like creating a model. You want to see, you want to kind of test it, kind of see things if work. See it before you do construction. See if it has any value. And as you see, modeling doesn't take that big a percentage because really here you're kind of testing things out. You're kind of testing things out to see how well it'll work during a construction phase. Maybe there's some new technology that you want to put in. You want to work with that prototype. You want to see if it works. If it's a comfortable software technology that will do real well. A lot of people use modeling. Car manufacturers use modeling. They see how things work. They test things. If it doesn't work right, at least you've knocked it out here versus construction where you've committed yourself to any software technologies. So that's the modeling budget. 9% comes out to $2,700, and you're really working on the ideas within the communication and the planning phase. Now, the construction phase is something that's going to be in the future. As of right now, this is the summer term. But the construction phase, obviously, is actually diving in, actually creating the project. You do create scenarios, and you do still do client trials, and you do some testing. Actually, you always do testing. And you adjust timeline if necessary. This is where you're actually going and actually you're executing the plan. Modeling gave you some tests and some ways to, maybe a new way to actually do something. But construction is where you're fully implementing your ideas, your new software technologies, if applicable. You start doing your testing to see if it actually works, and you're really going back to the client during these testing to say, hey, is this really which one? You always want to make sure the client's involved, making sure that this is what they want. Now, construction phase takes, in this application, 70% with a cost of $5,100. And like I said, this is where you start building and you start hoping that there won't be that many changes. There's always an agile change, an agile way of doing things, and you're hoping that there won't be too many changes. You're hoping the modeling kind of knock those changes out. But construction is, of course, where you really set things in stone, and it takes a lot of rework if you have to revisit those other phases just to make changes within this construction phase. The deployment phase. By then your application should be working. Hopefully you got most of the bugs out. And this is where you want to train the user. You want to present it to them and say, you know, this is the draft. This, you need to approve it. Let's schedule it. Let's schedule some training. You might want to communicate with marketing department to see how you can market it and get everybody's buy-in, the leadership's buy-in, the stakeholders' buy-in, the users' buy-in. You want to finalize the manual and the FAQ documents. And the FAQ documents usually by now have the key FAQs that the user's going to ask you. So the user's going to ask you some things maybe they didn't find, maybe the things that they improve upon, maybe the questions that always came up. This is where you want to put them. As you see, the deployment phase takes up 13% with a budget of $3,900. 13%, obviously, the winner in this phase, obviously, still the communication, and that's always the key. That's kind of the starting block. The total budget is a breakdown of all the phases. Communication, 39. Obviously, what I've been saying is that's the overall majority of the percentage of the application. 22% is the planning. Modeling is 9%. It's where you have a real good understanding of this plan. and you're, like I said before, you want to test things, you want to prototype things, you want to put flow charts, you want to kind of hopefully reduce those risks. Modeling and planning are the key parts in reducing those risks. Construction 17%, and that's really dependent on how many developers are working on the project, the resources, many things, consideration, the percentage of construction, the speed of your computers. It can be any of those things that factor into that percentage. And the deployment, you always want to give a good deployment. You want to give a safe send-off, as I guess you could say, a really solid send-off of your application. These phases percentages come to 100%, and the total is $30,000. That's the estimated budget for MolaMessenger. And it really hasn't changed throughout the project. It's really kind of stayed the same. Sometimes phases might be increased, others might be decreased. Maybe there's some steps that don't need to be used, such as maybe there is a prototype that you totally deleted, didn't have to do it because you found some software, legacy software that worked well. Now the timeline of each phases is being outlined by a Gantt chart. Really the bars here, Gantt chart is a really good representation of tasks that are dependent on one another. Gives you a good overall feel for the timeline of that. As you see, the phase started in May 20th, and the communication phase ended on June 2nd. No adjustment times were needed. It went pretty smooth. A lot of applications that I've been involved before do have quite a bit of change, but this one actually went pretty smooth. The planning timeline did went out of schedule. The task to update the risk management document was added later. Some more risk tasks, ideas did come about, so that was actually added later. As you can see, the bar on the lower right did pop up. The create mockups of web application took a little bit of length there, and that was because you wanted to go back to the client to see if that really was what they wanted. The overall phase started on May 31st, ended on July 12th. The planning timeline the modeling timeline, excuse me, did go as scheduled, and the documentation, starting of the manual, of course the PowerPoint presentation was started, and the prototype during modeling timeline started. And really, prototypes are a good way to execute some software, like I said before, and it's not necessary, depending on your software skills and so forth. Sometimes it's a good idea to just see how things work. And like I said, the construction and the deployment are in the later term. But I wanted to concentrate on documents produced in the communication phase. These documents were the project definition. The overall definition checklist was what I gathered out of this documentation. Key questions needed to really start that application. It was a standard form amongst other projects that was a good way to really start off. So good checklist. The detailed budget. You got to have a dollar's worth to the client. They're going to have to pay for your time, or else you'll be out of business. And it outlined task jobs all around. Now, you give them a general budget and you're hoping not to deviate too much of it, but you have to really consider that usually clients come back with more additions. And with this case, there really wasn't. Obviously, they're not going to give me that dollar amount, but the estimated dollar amount given was basically the value of that project, so they knew what that value was. The software project management plan basically documents the constraints, the summaries, the phase organization chart. It's the overall picture, but this is a way to get everybody, all the stakeholders, everybody who's on this project, an overall standard view of what they're looking at, what's the risk, the technical process. Everybody's on the same page. Timeline. Obviously, a document that's going to detail the task start, end date, how long things are going to take. totaling hours. That should sometimes be adjusted quite frequently, sometimes not. That way people can see that, hey, they can't start their job until somebody else ends theirs. The methodology, which outlines the project summaries and the task, it's a good overall view. The risk management strategy is a standard document that lists risks. The risks are then determined to be a high-level threat, medium, or low threat, and there should be a strategy on how to avoid that risk, or basically how to curb that risk. In other words, lower the odds of that risk that might be coming about. The software requirement specification is a document that establishes how are you going to create this application, what is being used. If you have a developer that doesn't know this application, well, once he sees the software requirements, he may need a lot of training, or he may bail out of the application because he's not really versed in that language. Software requirement specification gives you all the information within that. What's going to be the platform, the frameworks, the languages, all that good stuff. During the modeling phase, wireframes was created. It gives a somewhat of a high-level snapshot of the application. The class diagram, this outlines object-oriented programming. Class diagram obviously are objects within the program that the software is going to use. Object-oriented programming. The diagram basically outlines what they are and how they relate to each other, the relationship between each class as each entity. Database modeling schema. Database modeling, it occurs by the database outlining the database tables and attributes. You want to see the tables involved, the relationship between the tables and the attributes within those tables, how they going to connect to each other, how do they create that database altogether. Schema is just kind of the back end of the metadata that's involved in creating this database. The entity relationship diagram is the diagram. It's a flow chart type diagram in a way that shows the tables, shows its attributes, shows in a visual representation of how the tables relate to each other. That's where the relationship goes. How does that table have a relationship with this other table, and how do those attributes interact? This is where your foreign keys and your primary keys are designated. You get a quick glance at how that database is constructed. Now, like I said in the front, the objective for MolaMessenger was to help Baptist Healthcare in improving its process. They do have a process in place, but there's always room for improvement. And the objective of MolaMessenger is to send disaster-related messages to the appropriate email addresses. Email addresses, when I meant, would be facilities. It could be the groups of people. However the organization feels fit to contain these contact lists, these email addresses, they can do that. They'll have to enter email addresses under a category, and this category will just basically encompass these email addresses. Now, at the beginning, that might be a little bit of a time issue you have to put in, but you get a standard contact list that you can update, add, delete, whatever you need to do with it. Like I said, consolidate the group contact list that'll be available to approved publishers. That way, multiple users, maybe a user from another hospital within the healthcare system, will have that same contact list from another user. That way, there's no room for error. When somebody leaves the organization, they can delete them from that email group, or if they need to add somebody. And that happens a lot. You've got a lot of people coming in and out, hiring, some people who just retire, and that way the quick and accurate email addresses needed to get that message sent to is within one location. Archiving messages in the database so client website can pull in recent messages. That's really an important factor within the idea. They really wanted the website to have the updated information. That's one thing they really stress. They did like the contact list. They did like being sent to the right facility, but they really stressed that the lapse of time between sending that message and getting out to the public, the website, internally or externally or both, was a key thing. They're really trying to get their IT process down quickly, accurately, and accessible. The MolaMessenger working as planned would be a helpful resource to organizations so they don't have to worry about the details when that disaster type comes in. They still have to update their contact list. That's very important. But once that update is listed and ready to go, the message can be sent with confidence, accurately, accessible, and quickly. Information within healthcare is a big time-sensitive issue. The quicker you can get it out, the error-free you can get that message out. The accessibility that it needs to go out are key components of any healthcare. It doesn't have to be Baptist Healthcare, it can be any of these healthcare facilities or any organization that the public, the press, the internal staff need to know. You don't want to leave them in the dark. You want to make sure everybody's on the right page. Information is key within any organization. You want to make sure they have the information needed to be successful in getting through that disaster.